What's going on, everyone? I'm Harry Potvin, and welcome back to Season 2 and another episode of the H Panel, the show where we bring on guests from all different backgrounds to talk mental health. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by motivational speaker and mental health advocate Asante Haughton. Presenting twice for Tedx, Asante uses storytelling and rap to share his own personal journey with mental health, spread positivity, and make a change in the lives of everyone listening. Additionally, he uses his platform to highlight inequities in our system, such as structural racism and poverty, as they are detrimental to the mental health of individuals in marginalized communities, but isn't really focused on enough. In his own words, his key message is, if you can't see the light, still search for it, that if you're scared, find courage, and that if you feel like giving up, don't, because there is always hope. And I love that message. Asante, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Man, as you read that, I forgot I even said that, so thanks for reminding me.
Yeah, no problem. Before I get too into questions, how are you feeling? I know you're still recovering from COVID-19. What was that experience like for you?
Oh, man, they say that for younger folks, you're going to be all right. Well, I mean, you might survive it.
Yeah.
But it was terrible. So, really protect yourselves, wear your masks. Do what you need to do, wash your hands. It's also about protecting, our loved ones and especially our elders, right? But overall, I mean, it knocked me out for about 3 weeks, and then I've been physically recovering ever since. And it's been about a month now that now I'm starting to feel closer to 100%. But it really does a number on you.
Yeah.
Potentially, some folks walk around with the asymptomatic, but I was not one of those people.
Man, thankfully you're back to almost 100% now, which is very good news. I'm glad to hear that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of where you grew up, what kind of made you choose the career path that you're in, stuff like that.
This might take a while, man.
That's fine. I got all the time in the world, man.
All right, cool. So me, I was born in Jamaica, came to Canada when I was about two and a half years old. Came to Toronto. Been in Toronto ever since. Except for a short break in the suburbs there for a couple of years, which wasn't my favorite. What was interesting about how I came to Toronto is that my father was here first, and then my mom and, my two brothers came afterward. Shortly thereafter, my parents split when I was around 4 or 5 years old. Hard to remember the exact age because I was a little one. We were in the shelter for a little while. My mom and my two brothers transitioned out of the shelter as my mom figured some stuff out because she's a very resourceful woman. Then we were in the projects pretty much. For me, I was in the projects up until age 24 when I finally moved out. So, different projects at different times. Growing up in Toronto, and seeing Toronto change has been really interesting for me because Toronto in the 90s was like a much different place than Toronto nowadays. Where Toronto in the 90s was still not diverse. It was still predominantly white. There was still just racism everywhere, to the extent that, me and my friends and, my brothers, we all kind of knew that we couldn't go downtown if we were not, essentially in a pack, so to speak, because the threat of actual violence was a real thing. Growing up, you'll see swastikas on the school buses and, in the bathroom stalls and those kinds of things, and folks would try to intimidate you. So there's that aspect of it. And then, on a familial aspect, like I said, my parents split when I was young. The older I got, my second TED Talk is about this. The older I got, the less I saw of my father. And, by around age, 11, 12, there was a point where I didn't see him for an entire calendar year. And, I had this emotional call on the phone with him where I was like, why don't you love me? And, on the other end was just radio silence and something broke in me that day. And, then I started to notice a lot of changes in me. I stopped wanting to go out with my friends. I stopped wanting to, do all the things I used to do, which was essentially not be in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And all of my friends would say, hey, you want to come over? Or, hey, you want to go play baseball? You want to do this, you want to do that? And I was like, nah, I'm just going to, chill at home. I think that's when I really started to get into, my more solitary activities like video games and reading. Yeah, so it was a hard time. Plus, we were super poor growing up. I don't think a lot of Canadians really understand what poor means.
Yeah.
There's first world poor and then third world poor.
Right.
And we were though we lived in the first world and thus had, housing that looked rather, normal, but outside of that, it really felt like we were poorer than poor in Canada, in the sense that, for years we were eating out of food banks. Hand-me-downs was a thing, or donated clothes, or you buy clothes, once every 2 years and try to make it stretch and make it last. And, that goes, the underwear, lack of socks. You'd be wearing your jackets until, your windbreaker became your winter jacket because it was so tight. It was tough, man. And at the same time, you look back on those times and it's like one of the good things, the benefits of growing up that way is you learn how to manage discomfort, which is a really, I think, important skill for anyone to learn. So I learned that in sports, but I also learned it just growing up because, you go through an entire, Toronto winter. And I know Toronto's not the coldest place in Canada, but I mean, Toronto's still pretty cold.
It's pretty cold, right? Yeah.
And you go through a Toronto winter and there's no heat in your house, right? So, it's like you come home and you're colder than you would be when you went outside, mm-hmm. right? Because like all the cold, same way heat gets trapped, cold gets trapped.
Yeah, right.
And, you're wearing, 3-4 layers, you're sleeping in your tube, you got the stove on to try to generate some kind of heat in the house. You don't got no cable, you don't got no internet, so all you really have at that point is your family. And, even that, my brother went away to school when I was like 10 or 11 years old. My oldest brother, he was in Windsor, so, I mean, he was far away. My mom was working all the time. I would see her maybe once a week. Both my brothers are much older than me, so I mean, my other brother's out the house, so I was like alone all the time, which in a lot of ways maybe, helps benefit the kind of stuff that I do now, right. Which is essentially like thinking a lot of things and then saying them out loud, right? So right. I had all this time to like just learn how to be introspective, reading these books and playing these video games and watching these movies and kind of learning how to storytell, because that was kind of my world around me was just filled with stories because there were no people around, right? I wasn't even really trying to be a storyteller. Man, I hated writing as a kid.
Oh, yeah?
I despised it. When it would come around with that, like, writing folder and you had to write your little paragraph in your notebook.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. Oh, man.
That was like the worst part of the school week for me. Like, it was like my least favorite thing to do in school. And I generally liked school, but that part of it, didn't like it. What really made a difference for me, though, in that regard was, like I said, I started being alone all the time. I just started reading a lot of books in like grade 5, grade 6. I just started reading so much. And I just got really into it. I pretty much read out the entire library of young adult novels geared towards boys in school, to the point that I just ran out of books to read. And my mom had to figure out how to, scrounge some money to get me some more books. I remember one time in grade 6, we're supposed to take the whole week to write like a short story and then hand it in. Me, of course, being a procrastinator,
I know. I
waited until Sunday afternoon to start the story that I was supposed to hand in on Monday, right?
Of course.
And we, back then you had, these old ass computers that didn't automatically save your shit. Can I swear on this? Sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
So I'm writing. I'm like pretty much at the end of the story. Like all of my ideas are down, and I'm actually pretty proud of what I'm writing. And then I don't know what happened. Lost the whole thing.
No.
Right. So I'm like, damn. But in writing they say you should never keep the first thing you write.
Yeah, they do.
Went back to the drawing board, started writing again. The story came out probably better than what I wrote the first time. Handed it in. I'm like, whatever, I'm just doing an assignment. My teacher, her name was Miss Ballantyne, and she came back a week later, and I'd gotten like A, like plus, like the highest A you could give on the assignment. And then, she's like, hey, can I read this story to the whole class? And I'm like, I don't know if that's a good idea, but I'm a kid. I don't really know how to say no to like this authority figure, right? And the reason I'm like scared to read it out to the class is because, it was essentially like a fantasy story, like swords and sorcery, all that kind of stuff, right? And back then that kind of stuff was not cool. Like I know now, like if you say, oh, I play Final Fantasy, like, you're good. Back then you couldn't mention that stuff in public. Like I had a crush on like this girl in class, and I was like, and she was like super cool, like the opposite of someone who would be into that kind of stuff, right? And I'm like, damn, I want to look like a nerd in front of this girl who I'm like basically in love with.
That grade 6 love.
Right. So anyway, Miss Valentine reads the story, and the whole time I'm just like slowly like shrinking farther into my chair as the story gets like nerdier and nerdier. I'm not even like looking at anyone else's reactions at this point. I'm like, let this moment be over, please God. We're missing lunch for this. By the end of it, you know, everyone's like starts clapping, and this is like grade 6 in like the projects. Like no one is clapping for nothing.
Yeah.
You know, everyone starts clapping. You know, people are coming up to me saying, "Wow, that was amazing." And again, these were kids who generally weren't like, nobody likes writing at that age.
Yeah.
You know, and then, you know, my crush comes up to me and she said, "Wow, that's such an amazing story." And I was like, "Okay, all right." Okay, Scarlett. Then my teacher afterward came to me and said, "You know, you really have a gift for writing. You should keep doing this." And that's where it all started for me, the writing piece.
Shout out to Miss Valentine.
For real. Like,
Man.
And I had the best teachers growing up. Could not complain in that regard.
Man, I know exactly the feeling of when a teacher's reading your stuff and you're in your chair, you're like, please no. And it's like your face feels like it's gonna melt because you're like blushing way too hard. Oh man. So you've spoken at 2 TEDx performances and, you know, at over like 100 appearances at both panels, conferences, schools, stuff like that. Is there one presentation you've done that really stands out for you, and why?
You know, I have a few that really stick out for me. You know, my first TEDx talk being one of them. But I did another, my very first talk definitely stands out to me. I was 26 years old. I'm not going to say my age now, but I'm older than that. That was quite some time ago now. But no, I was 25. Sorry. I was volunteering at a mental health organization in Ontario here, the Mood Disorders Association of Ontario. And they were partnering with the Catholic School Board to essentially do a program where young people with mental health challenges would go out and speak to other young people about it to essentially normalize the conversation.
Right.
This organization, MDAO, they didn't really have a lot of young people working in their offices. It was me and a couple other people. And they came to the 3 of us. One guy said no. And me and another young woman were kind of like voluntold into it. And again, at that point, I didn't know how to say no to anything, especially like authority figures. So I'm like, I guess I'm going to do it. So we spent like all spring writing and preparing my story and kind of figuring that piece out. And then in November of that year, I forget the year, but it was a while back. I remember getting on stage and being just terrified, looking at all these high school students, like hundreds of them just staring back at me. And I'm about to tell, you know, what I thought was an embarrassing life story to them. Because at that point, you know, I was really embarrassed about not my mental health challenges themselves, but ways in which, you know, I was behaving or trying to cope or trying to, you know, figure out my life, right? You know, all the mishaps and missteps that happen as a teenager and a young adult. And I was about to tell everybody all of that shit.
Yeah.
So I was afraid these kids were going to heckle me, ridicule me, all of that stuff. So they call my name and I get up and I stand up. And at this point, I didn't know how to memorize anything. So I'm holding this paper and I'm just like shaking. The paper's like trembling and like the sweat is dropping onto the page and like blurring out the ink. Like it was really bad. So anyways, I'm going through it. I don't know. I think I got to the part where I started talking about Dr. Phil and people just started laughing, right? But it wasn't like laughing at me. It was like laughing with me. Yeah. And let me tell you, like a lot of the like original material I wrote for that first talk, I would say about 60 to 70% of it still exists in like my typical presentation, which is most of my first TED Talk. When I wrote everything the first time, none of that stuff was written to be a joke. Like none of that stuff was written to, you know, kind of generate laughter or, you know, bring some levity to the story. But, you know, folks started laughing along and, you know, reacting to other parts. And, you know, some people were like tearing up and all these different reactions were happening. I was still like blackout in the zone because I was just so nervous. And I just remember everything ending, the whole room just erupted in applause in a way that it just didn't for any of the other speakers that day. and it was like a whole day program. Right after my talk was the lunch break, and I remember not eating lunch at all because I was talking to people for an hour about the talk I just delivered. And, folks who were high school students, folks who worked in, Toronto Public Health, in Toronto Community Housing, for the city, everyone was giving me their cards. They said, how often do you do this? I'm like, this is my very first time. And they're like, what? You're so natural up there. And all these different things. Immediately, it was like, wow, like, I got something to say. And people are, willing to listen, and I don't need to be shy about this stuff, and it's okay for me to talk about it. Because even me at that point, I was like, I'm not sure if it's safe for me to talk about this. That moment was the first moment, probably in my life, where I felt comfortable talking about how I grew up, because I just kind of wanted to erase that part of my life from my life, because I just thought, I had internalized a lot of these messages. I grew up in what I would call the no scrubs era.
Yeah.
You remember that song by TLC?
Yeah.
Right? There was so much stigma about being poor. And obviously there was stigma about, being a young man with mental health challenges and depression and anxiety and fears, sensitivities and things of that nature. I wanted to just push that aside and never mention it again once I got to a point where I didn't need to mention it. But here I was talking about it and realizing that it could have a powerful impact on other folks. And I could really help people just by telling my story and, bringing people into my experience, and also bringing people into how I was able to, find some light in my life. That's probably the first talk that really had an impact for me.
I can kind of relate to that because I always, like you said, like having a young man with mental health issues, even now, is like, oh, like, you're so soft, like, like, grow up, all of that, like, all of these sayings. Yeah, be a man, like, all of these sayings. So I never, ever, like, talked about mental health, ever, to anybody, because I was like, man, I'm just going to man up, and it'll be fine. And it never was. So when I was kind of, figuring things out for myself, they asked me to do a mental health panel for the University of Guelph. And it was like a men's only thing. And like, I went there and I did it, and it felt like all this weight came off of me, and I was like shaking at the end, and there was like a really good reception. But I know a big fear of mine when I kind of started to open up about mental health, and when I was sitting there before, I was like, man, am I really going to share all of this stuff? Like, I don't want to share any of it, but I can't really back out now. There's like 300 people in this room. I can't be like, sorry, I got to go. So I know a big fear of mine was kind of, wondering what kind of reception I would get from my family and friends when it kind of happened. So when you first decided to go speak out, what was the kind of reception like from your family and peers?
Dude, that's a great question, because I don't even think I told anybody I was doing this for like 2 years.
Yeah.
So, until like, people saw me on the news and they're like, oh shit. Like, I didn't know this about you.
I know that guy.
Right, exactly. Like the very first talk I did, the only person I like even spoke about it with and brought with me was my girlfriend at the time, who was super supportive. Still mad respect for her, and everything that she helped me kind of build within myself. I didn't really tell my friends or family about it because I don't know, man. That just felt really close to home.
Yeah.
And then when they did learn about it, you're kind of afraid that they're gonna think about you differently. Mm-hmm. Especially if these are people that you grew up with, because
exactly.
They're there for like a lot of your experiences, and they may not have seen what you were experiencing.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but like there are some folks who are like, damn, I didn't know you were going through that. Mm-hmm. And then they kind of felt guilty that they never saw what was happening or checked in on you or anything like that. What was your experience like with that kind of stuff?
Man, like my best friend, like basically my brother, on family day, he'll have dinner with us. Like, I've known this guy forever. And when I started opening up, he was like, I never knew any of that. And like, he just like broke down. He was like, I wish I, was there for you and stuff. But it's not like, it's obviously not his fault. I had found a way to perfectly hide it from everyone. Like, the reception was like, you're always smiling, you're always joking around. Like, there's no way you're that guy. It's like, well, yeah, there's two sides of me. Everyone gets the good, happy guy. But when I'm alone, it's like, I was hurting. So, like, just like you, the reception was like, I had no idea.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to like how strong the stigma can be. Is that we can craft these entire personalities out of there to, you know, protect ourselves from what we don't want others to see.
Exactly.
Right? You know, for me, it was like I was just excelling in everything. And I felt like if people saw me excelling in stuff, they would never know that I was not excelling on the inside. So it's like, oh, he's student council vice president. He's captain of the basketball team. He's, you know, voted by faculty to be like the best student in school, and all these different things. Pretty much straight A's my whole high school career. It was all kind of like, if I could achieve one, people don't worry about you, and I don't know about you, but for me, I just didn't want anybody to worry about me.
Yeah, no.
Right?
Yeah, I
felt like so guilty when others would worry about me. Maybe that's something I'm still actually working through to this day. And the other piece was when you feel what it feels like to be like depressed, it's like you don't want anybody to see you because you're afraid that if the facade that you built for the world gets shattered, that no one will ever want to be around you, and no one's ever going to love you because you feel a particular way about yourself in those moments, and you assume that other people are going to see you through the same lens you're seeing yourself through. So you want to protect that.
Yeah.
So that's really what it was for me. And, you know, one of the benefits for me that helped me do that was that, you know, I moved across the city right before I started grade 9. So, like, nobody knew who I was before that. Nobody knew I was, like, essentially like a guy who talked and smiled all the time, right? Nobody knew about that. So when I showed up in grade 9 and I was kind of like the brooding, you know, poet kind of guy, just like that was my personality. And I just wanted to, you know, essentially be by myself a lot of the time, write and play sports. I kind of crafted this persona of like this enigmatic person that was like misunderstood and, you know, but still like very nice, you know, and all that kind of stuff. Kind of the wallflower that smiled a lot kind of guy, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, that was working for me because I was able to hang in the background, but also be visible enough to step up when I needed to. And that's kind of what I wanted. And, you know, once you go out there and you start telling your story, I mean, that especially with your family and friends, I mean, can't do that no more.
No.
So all of a sudden, everyone sees the real you and you feel naked. And you just kind of wonder how people are perceiving you because you kind of built a certain image of yourself for such a long time. But now people are really seeing you and you're kind of, I don't know about you, but I was really insecure about how the people closest to me would feel.
Oh, yeah.
When they learned of my story. Yeah,
big time. It's one thing to like speak to a room of random people you've never met before, and then once like, you know, you go to your family and you're like, this is happening. Oh my God. That was like the hardest part of everything. I can relate to your story kind of because it was hard for me to kind of go out and speak about it because I, like you, had built like this persona of like athlete, always happy, kind of does well in school, not great, but like he gets there. And like is just always happy no matter what's thrown at him. When in reality, like mentally that was not the case. But like it took a lot like this year to kind of just open up about it because I had gotten to a point in university where I was like captain of the swim team at the university. Like I was in like the student support network, which is like we sit there and listen to people talk about their mental issues. Like we're there for them. I knew a lot of people in the community at Guelph, and it was just like, man, the second I drop this, I know for a fact people are going to look at me different. Something people don't realize is like, it's usually always a really positive reception. And I think that's what needs to be advertised more because people are always scared to open up because they're like, people are going to hate me or like think I am absolutely weak when like in reality, that's not the case.
Yeah, man. I don't know about you, but before I started talking about my story, I felt like my world was really small. And now I feel like my world is huge.
Yeah, man.
And, you know, part of that is just in a lot of ways it did grow. I just know a lot more people, but also it opens up your relationships in ways that you can't even imagine. You know, all of a sudden there's a level of intimacy with everyone in your life that you've only dreamed about, and feel liberated because now the people that you love actually love you because they know what you've been hiding. Because sometimes when you hide stuff, you're like, oh, this person, they love me, but they don't really know me. That kind of thing. And now they really know you and they still love you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's powerful because it's like, damn, I am capable of this thing that either my experience or my depression brain or whatever has been telling me I was incapable of, which is that someone can care about me, someone can have, compassion for me, sympathize, empathize, and just be there with me. I don't know about you, man, but that completely just floored me and changed my life.
You mentioned in your TED Talks that it wasn't really until university that you realized, or you kind of acknowledged that, you had depression and anxiety. Much like you, I didn't really confront what I had through most of my life because personally I wasn't aware that like I myself could have it, because I guess with the stigma, I always believed that, depression was kind of only for crazy people and weak people. That's just kind of where the stigma is gearing it towards. So what do you think needs to be done in order to help kids that are struggling identify this problem earlier? And how can we go about ending this, stigma around depression is only for crazy people?
Man, I didn't even know what depression was.
Yeah, man. Like, they don't teach you.
I literally didn't even know what it was until I was like 19 years old. I knew about the Great Depression.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I literally didn't even know what it was. And so I just thought I had like super low self-esteem and hated myself for reasons I couldn't figure out. What I think we could do about it is just really talk to kids from the time that they're little about emotions. All kids, but also I think an emphasis on young men, because we're just taught like two emotions, like happiness / joy and like anger.
Yep.
So it's not happy. We like process everything through like anger, and that's not always healthy for various reasons. You start conflicts, you get into fights. I don't know about you, man, but like growing up, I had like a quick temper.
Mm-hmm.
Because just like just like that, right? Well, I wouldn't say I had a quick temper, but once I got there, it was like 0 to like 100.
Yep.
Like I went from like happy-go-lucky to like I'm like blackout snapping on people.
Yeah.
How can you regulate emotions you don't know about?
Exactly. Yeah.
If you don't teach a kid that, what we might say is anger could be a whole bunch of different things. It could be frustration. It could be disappointment. It could be solemnness. Like it could be all these different things, but you're just feeling it as anger because that's all that's been taught to you. You're not given the tools to even understand what's happening inside of you, right? So I think, we focus so much on making sure that kids know things that realistically, 80% of that stuff they're going to forget by the time they reach adulthood.
Yeah. We
should be teaching kids how to be better people rather than, how to know things. And I don't think we really focus enough time on teaching kids how to be better people. It's like once you leave kindergarten, it's all about learning things at that point.
Yeah.
Why aren't we teaching kids about, the nuances and the many variations of emotions that one could experience? I think if you help a person learn how to be self-reflective, learn how to be introspective, learn how to really look in the mirror and really see themselves and learn that the emotions that they feel are okay. The emotions are always okay. Sometimes how we express them is not okay.
Right.
But the emotions are always okay. And if you could learn that the emotions are okay and then just kind of learn what's happening inside of you at any given moment, I think that gives a lot of power to everyone who knows how to do that. It's like a secret that other people aren't let in on. And then people, look at you and they say, wow, that person's really got it together. I don't got shit together.
Mm-hmm.
I just know how to recognize when my shit isn't together so I don't go around taking it out on other people or myself, right? For me, it's like, how can we talk to kids about their emotional world in a way that makes sense for them, and then bring them along as they get older, and then introduce them to words and labels that they can use for what they're feeling, and attach those words and labels to experiences either internally or externally. So now they can say, I'm feeling this, which made me, say this to myself in my head, or made me do this, to some person. And, whether it's good or bad or healthy or unhealthy, I prefer healthy or unhealthy to good or bad, because everyone's different in terms of how they respond to things. And I think if we really focused on that with children, I mean, we're just helping people be better people and essentially creating a better world.
Yeah, definitely. And like, especially when they're that young and that easily, like, that's an age where they're so easily influenced and they're like growing and their brains are developing. So teaching them like to identify feelings and acknowledge them and like learn how to deal with them would be huge. Like, I could not tell you what I learned in math in like grade 4 or grade 5. I don't remember any of it. So like, just giving them something valuable to learn that'll actually help them later in life, like that would be massive.
For me, I think about things on a micro level and also a macro level.
Mm-hmm.
And I get upset when people say one person can't change the world. I think that's just nonsense and BS. All right, because Miss Valentine changed my world.
Yeah,
I'm one person, and with all the talks I've done, all the panels, TED Talks, article I wrote last week that is like blowing up on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm reaching people now in what I assume is in very positive ways. Thousands of people because of Miss Valentine.
It just takes one person. That's all it takes.
Right? So we got to let go of these things. Another thing, I'm going on a tangent now. Another thing I don't like.
No, go.
When people say such and such isn't realistic. The moment you say something is not realistic to a child or anybody really, but especially a child, you are killing their dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Never tell a child something is unrealistic.
Right.
If it might be hard or no one's done it before, you can say that. But don't say it's not possible.
Yep.
Because now someone who could have changed the world is no longer going to try to. Because you're projecting your own limited beliefs about yourself onto someone else. Don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Stop it.
Yeah.
We don't advance the world that way.
Yeah.
But when Galileo was telling us that the planets revolved around the sun, everyone was like, what's wrong with this guy? Right? To the extent that he had to like hide his findings and not tell anybody until he was like basically, on his deathbed or what. I think that's a story, I don't know. But point is that like you can't tell people that things are unrealistic or not possible or it doesn't happen that way, because then you are essentially pressing pause on the world and we're not evolving anymore, whether it's physically or the way that we think about the world. And, we're kind of living through one of those moments right now, and I feel that way as a black person a lot right now, is that, like, there's always been, like, racism is never going to end.
Man, I hear that.
The same way.
I hear that all the time.
It's not going to end if you don't try to end it.
That's what I've been trying to tell people, man. They're like, what is my contribution going to do? I'm like, well, if everyone thinks like that, nothing's going to happen.
Exactly.
Man.
Right? Just go out there and try. That's like beneath all of my messages that I do in like any space. When I talk about hope and stuff like that, really what I'm saying is like, just go out there and try.
Yeah.
Because if you don't try, you don't know what's possible.
Mm-hmm. There's a quote I really like. I don't know who it is, but it's like, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. So if we take
That's
out...
deep, bro. I'm taking that one.
Do it. No, take it. It's not mine.
It's just ridiculous that people hold on to these things. But I think, from like a human standpoint, I think a lot of it is just insecurity and internalizing, things that, maybe we've been taught when we were children that, we don't have power over our world. And I think we have immense power. The other tangent, I didn't get to this part of my tangent, but I'm going there now. The other part of my tangent that I don't like what we tell children is, you're too nice.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell is that? Like,
what does that mean?
Like, are we really admonishing people
for being nice?
Like, is this the world that we're living in? And then we say we want a better world. We want equality. We want this. We want that. But don't be too nice.
we want everything to be good, but you're too good. Stop it.
Yeah. All I heard growing up was, hey, Asante, you're too nice. You're naive, you're idealistic, you're this, you're that. And, I would always feel like guilty or hurt, but that's just who I am, so I can't change.
Yeah. You feel guilty about being nice.
Right? What is that about? I guess you're telling me that when I was in kindergarten and growing up watching, TVO and all that stuff, kids shows, and everything was telling me to be nice. And then I start doing that, and you're like, nah, you went too far in that direction. Too much. Like, what are you saying to me right now? I'm confused. Like, don't tell kids that either, because that's when that's when you kind of give kids permission to be bullies. Mm-hmm. And not every bully is going to be the kind of bully that intimidates you physically or punches someone in the face. Bully could be the smart kid who makes sure that they get all the class time. Right. And intimidates the other kids from putting their hands up in class. Mm-hmm. That kid's a bully too. Yeah. Right? So, we really got to think about these things that we're saying to children. What we instill in children will always manifest in the world that's created 20, 30 years down the line. And then we throw our hands up in the air and say, wow, everything is messed up. How did we get here? We got here because we did it. Yeah. I actually think a lot of life is really simple. Mm-hmm. In the sense, I'm a big believer that action, consequence. One of the things I have written on my whiteboard in my kitchen, because I have all these inspirational quotes that I have on the whiteboard there. And one of the things I have written up there is, champions make championship decisions. Mm. You obviously excelled in swimming, so you know what that means, right? Yeah. You know that means getting up early. You know that means going to bed early if you need to, so you can get up early. You know that means that you have to, 90% of your meals need to be good meals. You know that you have to, stay on your training schedule. You know that, sometimes you have to, you're having a great phone call with your partner, but you have to get off the phone because you got something else to do. Yep. You know all that stuff. Those are championship decisions. The championship decision isn't showing up to the meet and winning the race. Yep, right. That's the result of the championship decisions. Yeah. Right? So, I use sports as metaphors for like everything, but what I'm saying is that if you want a world that is equal, and if you want a world that is safe, and if you want a world where you can live your dreams, I think the best dream to have is happiness. Yeah. If you want that world, then, collectively, we all need to make championship decisions to get there. Mm-hmm. I need to not squash the dreams of children before they even have a chance to figure out that they had a dream to begin with. Yeah. I need to treat, the waiter who made a mistake on my order with respect, because everyone makes mistakes. Like, absolutely. You never made a mistake before? You never forgot nothing before? You never forgot to put a minus sign in front of your math question and you lost half a mark? Oh my God. Took me back. You're upset that they forgot to take tomatoes off your sandwich? Yeah. Come on, man. And then you're going to shout this person down and ruin their whole fucking week? Mm-hmm. Over that, we just need to be nicer people more often. Absolutely. Kind of going back to what you were saying about the championship mentality and how winning the race is just a result of all that championship mentality. I think, adding to that, I've mentioned this before in other videos and stuff, is like a lot of people, what they do is they compare themselves to the end result as opposed to all the hard work that someone did, all the dedication they took to kind of get there. They're just like, why are they winning and I'm not? And I know me personally, I've had that experience, and I'm sure you've had that experience too, where you have to go through the motions and you're going to therapy and you're doing all these self-help exercises and you're like, why is everyone else so much happier than me? And you're comparing your journey to someone else. And I know for me and for a lot of people out there, that makes you feel super discouraged because they're like, that guy's got it figured out and I don't. Something is wrong with me. When in reality, everyone's got their own pace. Everyone's got their own journey, their own struggles. What would you say to someone out there who may be feeling that kind of discouragement because they may not be, on the same level as someone in terms of mental health recovery? You got to keep going. Yeah. I sit here and I get up on stages and I talk, I tell my story, and it's I've been doing this for 2/3 of my life. I've been working on self-improvement. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if I can call myself, I think I'm young, but, I'm maybe transitioning out of youthdom. But what I'm saying is that, I started working on myself actively at 15 years old. Mm-hmm. And I started seeing the results probably when I was around 29. Yeah. And that's not when, I stopped, being, I would say, just debilitated by depression and anxiety when I was around 22, 23, right? Doesn't mean I was all good. Right, yeah. This meant that, depression and anxiety weren't absolutely dominating my life anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were still hitting me with the body punches, but, you know, I was coming back a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Then, you know, I got to 29 and I was able to look around my world and just understand that I finally, like, got to a place of understanding about myself that I can now have some level of power over my own happiness and know what the right things for me are and what the wrong things for me are, and to feel at peace with who I am as a person. You know, it took me 14 years just to get to that point, and I still practice every day. Mm-hmm. Every day I practice. I live my life through that lens of, am I improving today?
Yeah.
Am I being mindful of what's going on inside of me? I live that every day. Mm-hmm. Because if I don't, then I know I'm going to fall off.
Yeah.
So, like you said, you can't compare. You know, we often compare ourselves to someone else's result without seeing their practice.
Yeah.
You know, and one thing that really taught me that was one of my brothers. He was really good at basketball growing up, and you know, he grew up as kind of a chubby kid. And then one summer, and you know, he just kind of like grew like 8 inches, and all that, you know, flab became abs, so to speak.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, he was like this like super athletic guy. You know, he grew in height, but the flab went to ab because I used to see this guy get up at 6, 7 a.m. every morning for an entire summer. 6, 7 a.m. every morning. You know, it's something that had to just inspired him to want to be great at basketball. So he would get up every morning and he'd go run the stairs in the apartment building, you know, essentially until he was tired.
Yeah.
Then he would come home and he would eat breakfast and then he would rest, right? Around 11 a.m., noon, he'd go out to the basketball court and he would just practice for about 3 hours. You know, it was like a schoolyard, so there was the wall of the school and then the basketball court. He'd throw passes with both hands against the wall to improve the accuracy of his passes.
Yeah.
He'd do chest passes. He'd do bounce passes. He did that for like an hour of just throwing the ball against the wall to know how to throw a pass. And then he'd work on his dribbling, full court, up and down the court, dribbling. He'd get to half court, crossover. Then he'd come back, crossover behind the back. You know, then he'd come back, crossover through my left leg, crossover right. He'd do that for an hour. Then he's shooting jump shots, hundreds of jump shots, right? Then he'd go home and eat lunch. Then he'd go back out to the court later in the afternoon when other people were showing up. And then he would play until everyone left.
Yeah. And
then he would come home and then work out.
As if that stuff wasn't enough.
He did this almost every single day for an entire summer. Mm-hmm. You know, essentially 2 months. Yeah. He went from being like, no one even cared about who he was in high school in terms of like sports, to being scouted by American universities to get scholarships. Everybody was convinced this guy was going to make the NBA. We all knew it. You know, he had a devastating leg injury, and that kind of unfortunately ended that for him. But everybody knew this guy was going to the end. He was that damn good. Yeah. You know, he's 6'5", super athletic, just dunking on people. It was like I was watching an NBA player in front of my eyes. I'm like, wow. Where did this guy come from? Yeah. And then, you know, he broke his leg really badly, and you know, when you're poor, sometimes you don't get the rehab and all of that stuff that you need, right? So that was kind of it for him. He lost a lot of confidence in just like the integrity of his leg being able to handle being an athlete, because he was just struggling with pain after that. Mm-hmm. When the leg healed. But I mean, he would have made the NBA, and I mean, realistically, he would have not only made the NBA, he would have been like an all-star. Like, yeah. He was really, really good. And you know, what I learned from that was the work it takes to be great at something. You have to practice, you know? So when people look at me now, and whether they say, oh, you're a great writer, or you're a great storyteller, or you're a great speaker, or you're great at being able to manage your own mental health, I literally have been practicing all of those things since I was 15 years old. Yeah. Every single one of those things I've dedicated to practicing every day since I was 15. So I mean, I've been writing probably since before that. I've been writing since I was, in Miss Valentine's class when I was 11 years old, right? So I was writing stories, I was writing poetry, I was writing rap music. I've just been doing this. Plus, I was reading, and reading is an essential part of learning how to write. I was reading 2-3 hours a day when I was in grade 5. I read a ton. I was like, how do you know all this stuff, bro? Like, because I'm reading all the time. What are you doing? Right? And oh, you're a great speaker. Yeah, I literally could not talk to people when I was 15 years old. A lot of my story writing, I was practicing conversation when I'm writing dialogue. What would someone say in this situation? How would you respond to this body language? I'm like going through these scenarios in my head and learning how to converse with people, and then going out into the real world and trying it out. And, how it would work. Even, being a funny person or having a sense of humor. I didn't have no sense of humor growing up. I was watching comedians nonstop, trying to learn, comedic timing. Like, all of the stuff that I am good at, I practiced it a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, man, you're so naturally talented. I'm not naturally talented at shit. I just practice hard.
Yeah. In regards to, like, working on your own depression and anxiety, like, I didn't realize, I think, going in, the kind of work it would take every day, like you said, to kind of get better. And it's a super long process. And I guess, like, people don't understand that, like, because they're comparing to other people. And also, like, this whole age of social media, like, you're only looking at end result. Like, man, like, the guy in all those ads who's like, you want lean muscle, like, you want to look like me.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I get him, like, every day on my freaking Instagram. And that guy, like, sure, he has his own tips and tricks, but that guy probably worked forever to get to that body type. But people see that and they're like, oh, I can get that in, like, 2 months probably, which is not realistic at all. It takes years and years for any sort of, like, mental or physical peak to come around. Yeah, man.
One of the hardest parts of the journey in terms of trying to help somebody is convincing them to do the work.
Yeah.
Even, like, for me, like, I started coaching basketball this year and then the pandemic hit. But, the hardest thing for me as a coach was to get them to do the work. And then once they started doing the work, we started looking like how the Toronto Raptors looked last year when they were just running up and down and relentlessly, just mentally, just dominating the competition, because there was just a level of assuredness in what you could do because you've done the work. Confidence doesn't come from it's not this ethereal thing that just floats down out of the air and lands inside your heart and now you're confident.
Yeah.
Confidence comes from doing the work and then proving it on stage.
Yeah.
That's where confidence comes from.
Yeah, my dad always used to say, like, before swimming, when I would get, like, super nervous, he was always like, just trust your training. Like, that's it. Just put your trust into the work you've done and don't overthink the end result, and it'll come to you.
That's it, man. I'm such a big believer that every kid should play sports.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Should play a sport, and to do it for not just a year, but like several years.
Yeah,
and get into it, and hopefully you have some good coaches around you to really develop this practice of knowing that when you start playing a sport, unless you're destined to be a pro athlete, you're gonna suck at it.
Oh yeah. Man.
You're just not gonna be good.
No.
And then over time you become better. And then you look back and it's like I couldn't even dribble basketball. I couldn't. One of the things I used to do when I was a kid, I used to play a lot of road hockey.
Mm-hmm.
I played a ton of road hockey. And when you're a kid working on your wrist shot, trying to just raise the puck to go top shelf, like, how hard that was as a kid? And then the first time you do it, you're like, wow, I actually did this thing.
Yes.
You work on your slap shot and you're just like missing the puck completely.
Yeah.
It's like flying all over the place, right? All of that stuff. Hitting a baseball.
Yeah.
It takes a long time to even learn how to swing a bat.
Mm-hmm.
Dribbling a basketball. Dribbling a soccer ball.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Man, I still can't do it.
Right. It's a tough thing to do. But then eventually you get it. And, things become normal and natural. It's all about the practice.
That's
Everything
all it
is
is,
practice.
It's all the work that you put in.
And as an adult, I have focused the majority of my work internally. I've never said I want to be this thing. I mean, I've always had, I would say, like a vision of I want to be this thing, but I would say 20% of my time has been learning the skill of that thing, and 80% of my time has been developing the internal practice. You know, what do I say to myself in my head? You know, how am I visualizing this thing? How am I relating to people more? You know, obviously, there's some level of external practice to skill, but most of it has been internal, because at some point I realized that everything you do internally to build yourself up will then be reflected externally without you even trying.
Yeah. Like if you're limiting yourself mentally and you're putting the work in, the work's not going to...
When you start the game, you're going to choke.
Yeah, exactly, man. Like for swimming, like swimming is like 95% mental. You can be the fittest exactly. You can be the fittest athlete out there. If you like don't have the mental like, yeah, I can do this, I think. Then the work's gonna go nowhere.
Yeah, you know what's interesting, you know, they talk about in sports, they talk about those who show up for the, you know, under the bright lights, those who are clutch, so to speak. And, you know, as someone, you know, you've excelled in sports. So I'm assuming that there was a mental process to how you approach the swim meet. You know what I mean? And I don't know about you, but anytime I've ever been successful in a game, whether it's an organized game or a pickup, I have never thought about losing.
Right.
And for me, it was always, especially in those key moments where you're at the end of the race, there was no point in my mind where I was like, oh my God, I might lose this race. It was more, I have to do everything I can to win this race. Mm-hmm. That's where like my thought process was, you know? Right. When I was playing like basketball, you know, growing up, it was, you know, I always wanted the ball at the end of the game. You know, the first 3 quarters of the game, whatever it was, I was distributing, I was passing, you know, I was rebounding, I was being, you know, more of a facilitator. But those crucial moments, I had so much belief in myself that I was going to get it done. I was like, you know, my whole demeanor would change from nice guy to like game face, give me the ball, and I'm either going to score it, draw a foul, or make a play for someone else. That I never even thought that any other possibility could ever occur.
Right.
You know, those who, you know, in sports, they get scared under the bright lights, and you can see it happening.
Yeah,
you know?
They crumble, yeah.
You could see it happening in real time, and this person looked amazing in practice, but when it comes to performance, I'm not a good practice player.
Man, I
I'm
was
not good in practice.
I was not a good trainer.
I didn't like practice, I did it. But, you know, I'd be, you know, before the game, I'd be, you know, warming up, shooting shots, and, you know, typically a great basketball player is making all the warm-up shots. You know, I'd be missing shots all over the place. You know, people are like, oh, this guy can't shoot.
Yeah.
Whatever. I'm like, all right, wait till the game. Game would just be lights out. I'm not missing. Now I'm just so much in that zone that all I can focus on is success.
Right.
That's another thing I've written on my whiteboard at home is focused on success. Now, obviously, it came from sports, but what it means for me is as a person, I'm focused on being a successful person. Mm. And that doesn't mean, you know, achieving a lot of my career and making a lot of money. I mean, that helps. But what it really means for me is, am I hurting people or am I helping people? And I want to help more people than I hurt. I'm not ever going to go through a life where I don't hurt somebody because it just happens sometimes. Mm-hmm. But if I could encounter 100 people and help 90 of them, then I think I'm doing well. If I can help 95, I'm doing really well. If I can help 99, then I'm essentially, you know, a monk at that point.
Yeah.
And I'm not there, but I'm always trying to get there. Mm-hmm. And there was a point in my life where I was the guy who was, you know, I was on that 50-50 line, you know, and people were like, oh, you're such a great person. It's like, yo, I wasn't always this person. There's a point where I realized I was hurting a lot of people in my life, and I had to make the change and practice being a better person.
Right.
You know, I'm going to focus on the success of what that looks like to be that better person, rather than sit in the guilt and worry of what if I'm not. And I don't say that like to demean or denigrate anyone who has trouble with, you know, coming out of that guilt or, being in that place, because that's hard. I've been there before too. But it's when you do the practice, the results will follow.
Yeah, definitely. It's all about practice, man. You mentioned in your interview recently with Kevin Frankish that, with everything going on right now, it is a hard time, but it isn't a hopeless time. What are some ways that you can share with the viewers that you've been able to keep hope in like times like this when it seems almost impossible?
How can it not be hopeful, man? Look at, we got hit with a pandemic.
Hard.
Hard. And I look out my window every day and I see folks walking around with masks.
Mm-hmm.
And, I always look out the window. I'm always looking and paying attention to people. And when the pandemic, the shutdown first started, the streets were almost empty. And now you see people in groups of 2 and groups of 3s, and everyone's wearing their masks and they're socially distancing, and people are making space for others on sidewalks. In this short period of time, 3 months, we have figured a way out. Humans have succeeded because of 2 things. Because we're good at building things, because we got these thumbs here.
Yep.
So we're good at physically building things. And the other thing that humans have been exceptional at is when the problems really hit us, we find a way to adapt.
Yep.
History has taught me that. I don't remember all the facts about history, but I do know one thing is that humans find a way to adapt. Humans are really hard to die. It's really hard to eradicate us.
Right.
We're like cockroaches.
Yeah.
We just don't go away.
Yeah.
So we continue to figure things out. So how can I not be hopeful?
Right.
We look at, if we want to talk about this social revolution happening around us as we're finally starting to address anti-Black racism. When I was growing up, a regular conversation in my house was, man, there will never be a Black president. Barack Obama came though.
He came right around.
Then you went, oh man, things are never going to change, man. The police are always going to be this way. Minneapolis is like, hey, we're going to try to figure out a way to not even have police in our city.
Yeah.
All you have to do to be hopeful is to look around. We have the benefit of living in a country that has winters, so we see the change. All we have to do is look outside. All the leaves will fall off and then grow back every single year. You get a cut on your arm and it heals.
Mm-hmm.
How can we not be hopeful?
Right.
We're always figuring out the problem. Even people are like, oh man, a vaccine's going to take 2 years. I'm like, give it a year. We're going to figure this out, everybody.
Yeah. A problem a lot of people have is especially with the media, they only focus on the negatives, and all the little progress that we're making with everything is kind of just in the back burner. I've had conversations with a lot of people, an unfortunate amount of people, where it's what we're doing right now isn't changing anything. It's well, that's because you're focused on all the negative that the media is throwing at you. If you look at the things that have already happened from, the movement that's going on right now, all the little progress that we've made already in the span of 2 weeks? Change is happening. Change happens when we all come together.
That's it, man. And, one thing about humanity is as much as we're against each other sometimes, when all the chips are down, we find a way to come together.
Yep.
So, I know it's tough and I know it's hard. And, someone said to me the other day on Twitter, they said, talking about this whole racism thing and, for me, obviously I have my frustrations from time to time as we all figure this out. And, they hit me on the DMs and this person said to me, you have the patience of an angel. In a way that put me in a somber mood because I don't think I'm anything special in that regard. I think for me, it's just I recognize that, we're not all in the same place and we all have different experiences and we're all growing. We're all learning, right? And I need to make room for that. You know what I'm saying? Because if I'm the person who's like, oh man, these white people didn't give a shit before, but now they give a shit, too little, too late. My big picture is still a world of equality, in a world in which me, as this 6'4" Black person, can walk down the street and feel safe. Am I bitter? Of course I'm bitter, but I'm not going to let that get in my way.
Right.
Of recognizing what's happening. It's I'm going to be patient. And maybe I'm going to do some emotional labor I don't want to or I shouldn't do or whatever. Because I'm still looking toward my big picture.
Yep.
And that's the most important thing for me, right? So my big picture is I want racism to end. I want all the isms to end if I'm being real.
Yeah.
I need to be patient so I can engage in the ways I might need to engage with friends, community, public, whoever, in order to make sure that we're all coming together, like you said, to make a difference and to make a change.
Yeah.
I know there are some folks who believe that maybe segregation is the way. I don't know, man. I don't know if I sit on any side of the fence there, but for me, I just feel like even if we're like segregated, where it's like, oh, there's this country here that's all black folks, and then there's a country here that's all white folks. Given the way that our global economy operates, we still need to work together.
Exactly. Yeah.
We still need to learn how to live together and respect each other. Not just respect each other, but give humanity to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of where we live, we still need to have that. Because at the end of the day, you're a human, I'm a human, and we're sharing this earth.
Right.
And we need to figure it out. And we need to figure it out together. Yeah.
Like we've mentioned before, it's going to take like everyone doing their part to kind of get to that point. There's too many people right now that are going, oh, I can't make a difference. I'm not in a position to make a difference, or like this doesn't apply to me, so I'm not going to do anything. There's too many people like that right now.
Everything applies to you.
Yeah.
That's not the way I live life. You know what I mean? I have people who say that to me. They're like, hey, man, why do you care so much about the LGBTQ movement? You're a cisgender, heterosexual male. Well, why do you care so much? I'm like, because that's a human being, bro.
Exactly.
How can I not care?
That confuses me so much. Like when people are like, why do you care about, the Black Lives Matter movement or the LGBTQ movement? Like, how can you not care? That I will never in my lifetime understand why people don't care. Like, they're people. That's it. I don't even need to explain anything else to you. They're human beings. So why,
Yeah. Would you not imagine, for me, it's like, put yourself in the shoes of someone who is being hurt.
Yep.
Remove identity from this picture. I'm not even talking about whatever social identity we all, live our lives in, the skin we live in, the identity we live in, etc. Imagine you are a person and you are being attacked by 3 other persons. Again, removing identities out of the picture.
Yeah.
And 100 other people walk by who all have the power to help you, and they don't.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to feel being the person being attacked, knowing these other people can help you, and they don't?
Yeah, exactly.
How do you not care about that person being attacked?
I wish I had the answer, honestly.
I don't get that, man.
I know.
It's because what it is? Because we tell kids they're being too nice.
Exactly. It starts from that.
Kids are such beautiful people.
Yeah.
Until we get a hold of their minds and poison them with things like that.
Exactly. Kids aren't born racist, transphobic, homophobic. They're not born anything like that. They're like, this is my friend, and that's all I see them as. And then it's later when they're influenced by other things that they get their, views.
There's not a problem with being different.
No.
We're so of difference in this country. I don't know why. It's okay to be different.
You know how boring it would be if everyone was the same person?
Oh my God.
That'd be horrible.
Big level of Super Mario Brothers every day.
Oh. No.
When you don't want difference, that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
You want to be the same page of the book every day. Do you want to watch the same 5 minutes of the movie every day?
No.
You want to watch the same sports highlight every day? If you don't want difference, that's what you're subscribing to.
Exactly. Like even when I was a kid, I was afraid to be different. Why is being different so frowned upon?
I don't know, man. Me too. I was afraid to be different too, man.
I used to get bullied so hard in elementary school because I wouldn't talk to anybody. I was obsessed with like bugs and animals and stuff. So like at recess, I would like go into the forest or in the corner and like look at bugs and stuff. And everyone's like, he's not playing sports. He's not flirting with girls. He's weird, man. He's different. I don't like that. So I got bullied for it. Why do people bully people for being different? It doesn't The
biggest privilege I have had in life is the way that I was raised, which was essentially just to see the humanity in everybody.
Yeah.
So for me, I always gravitate toward difference because I find different to be interesting.
Right.
And I get bored really quick when everything is staying the same.
Yeah.
Or so like if you were to see like if you were to put all my friends in a room, I mean, it would look like the United Nations. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
I feel that.
You know what I'm saying? So
yeah.
It's just like, that happened naturally for me just because I'm a really curious person. So I look at difference as, wow, that's some really cool stuff, man.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than, I don't want to be around that.
Yeah.
And I wish we could just raise all of our kids that way because we don't. What we do is when parents download their fears into kids,
mm-hmm.
right? So if I am, for whatever reason, afraid of difference, whether it's because that person's a different race or a different gender or has a different sexual orientation, or I don't know, maybe they have a disease that makes them look different. And then I'm walking down the street with my kid, and then, the kid is like looking or whatever, and, just being curious. And you're like, no, don't talk to them.
Yeah.
You immediately told that kid just not to only discriminate against that person, but to discriminate against those who are different from you.
Yep.
Stop doing that.
It's just one little motion, and that kid's going to remember that forever.
And then they're going to turn 25, and someone's going to say, you're racist, or you're sexist, or you're transphobic, and they're not going to feel that way inside of themselves.
Yep.
But someone at a very young age taught them that, and they don't even know it.
Yeah.
A big part of where we are in society now is, and this is why I'm always paying attention to people and reading, is we need to learn so that we can unlearn.
Right.
We all get these problematic messages downloaded into us.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm not even going to mention all the problematic stuff I used to do or say or whatever, but I mean, there was a lot of it.
Yeah.
Far more than I ever thought. Because I always thought, like, oh man, I don't got nothing against nobody. And I didn't have anything against anybody because I wasn't going out there and like discriminating and like, hurting people actively.
Right.
But I was telling the jokes.
Yeah.
And I was letting things slide. And I was actively not understanding someone else's experience.
Mm-hmm.
Because it didn't matter to me.
Yeah.
Right. Now I realize I can't live like that. I need to want to know about someone's experience and then to do something about that desire to actually learn about that person's experience, to be curious. Because that is how we create empathy.
Yep.
And then we get to that place of, a better world. And I know, we've been talking about mental health, and I think mental health is a great microcosm in terms of, now we're normalizing the conversation and talking about it. And hopefully we can extrapolate that to other experiences in our social world.
I always say, like, conversation is where it starts. Like, you have to have conversations. They're going to be, like, right now, they're going to be so uncomfortable for a lot of people. Like, the conversations you're having right now with, like, family and friends and everything are uncomfortable, but they need to happen.
Dude, and, I think one of the assumptions is that, like, within my community of Black folks, we're having uncomfortable conversations, too.
Yeah.
Amongst each other in terms of how do we respond to this movement. Whereas some folks are, oh, man, this is just performative. No one really cares about this. Other folks are more hopeful. Other folks are removing themselves from it. There are all these different things happening in terms of, how we feel about what's happening in our world right now. I can't speak for everybody, but that's just what I've observed, right? So, I mean, even, I think there's this assumption that, like, with the Black folks are, like, some sort of monolith.
Yeah.
And then we all think the same thing and think the same way and believe the same things. That's not true.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that we have in common is our suffering.
Right.
Which is unfortunate, but that is kind of, where a lot of the coming together, the underlying thread, the other things, spirituality, some shared histories and experiences of the world. But I mean, that the suffering is a big one, but beyond that, it's like different people respond differently to things and different people think differently. And because of that, I'm having uncomfortable conversations with my friends. I'm having uncomfortable conversations with my family, co-workers who are Black. A lot of uncomfortable conversations.
A lot, yeah.
But, that's where we're at. And that's what we got to do.
Mm-hmm. It's the first step. Like sports, like mental health, it's work. We got to keep working at it. Everything going on right now is not a trend, as, like, some people are treating it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all work, man. It's not just gonna overnight be like, oh, hey, we solved racism. That's cool. We solved centuries of problems right now in 2 weeks. It's not gonna happen like that. You kind of answered all the questions I had about, what's going on right now with the movement. I've got one question left. What would you say to people, and there's a lot of people out there who are firm believers that Canada is not racist?
Man, then you're not paying attention.
Yeah.
And one thing that has really struck me in the last little while, I would say this week in particular, is that you do not recognize racism if you live in a bubble.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if all of the folks in your social circle look like you and think like you, how are you going to recognize racism?
Yeah.
If you don't, if I'm a white person and I don't have a black friend or a friend from India or a friend from Venezuela or a friend from, Cambodia, to help me understand, in their experiences of the world, how the heck am I going to be able to recognize racism when it's happening? Yep. If I've never had engaged with someone else who has experienced it and they've told me, this is what racism looks like through my lens. Right?
Right.
I think, therein lies white privilege. It's like,
yeah.
You don't have to think about racism because it's not happening to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And if you don't have any friends or family members or coworkers or whoever that you're close to who racism does happen to, who have to think about it, then you're not going to recognize it even exists.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm seeing recently is that I don't say this to condemn or criticize anybody, but our society has been built in such a way where we've been so segregated, where white folks are over here and other folks are over here, and different groups, and we're all just kind of occupying different spaces but living in the same city or the same country. And maybe I'm only consuming media from people who look like me, whether it's books, news, TV, movies, video games, sports, whatever. If I don't know anything about someone else's experience, I'm not going to see them.
Yeah.
I'm going to see their day-to-day. So what I've noticed is that, in our society, we have made black folks so invisible and removed black folks from any conversation at all.
Yeah. Because
you haven't seen black people, you just don't know what they're experiencing. And because of that, when we have said stuff in the past, the privileged lens is there must be another reason.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have never experienced the reason, which is racism.
Yeah.
So, you have to find another reason to make it even make sense to you in your head.
Mm-hmm.
Racism just doesn't even make sense to you. You can't even conceive of it because it has never happened to you.
Right.
And I don't mean that, you haven't ran into someone who's not a white person who said a mean thing about white people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's not nice. No one should be doing that. You know what I mean? But when I say racism, what I mean is you haven't walked into a store with the assumption that the clerk doesn't want you there.
Yeah.
And people following you around the store. You haven't gone into an interview wondering who you're going to be interviewed by and whether that person's identity is going to determine your result. You haven't been in class and you're the only person with your hand up and the teacher ignores you. But then you put your hand down and then someone else puts their hands up and the teacher picks them. Or you say the same thing and the teacher looks at you like you're an idiot. And then another person said the same thing in different words. Or sometimes very similar words and the teacher says, oh man, that's great contribution.
Yeah.
That's where racism is really damaging. It's in those moments. And those are the moments that are harder to see if you don't experience it. I remember being in kindergarten, not even kindergarten yet, daycare, and wondering why only the kids who are not white are playing with me. 4 years old.
Yeah.
And already noticing that the white kids won't play with me, but the other kids will.
Mm-hmm.
The Asian kid or the South Asian kid or, or the white kids that would play with me, oftentimes were like, the Romanian kid.
Yeah.
Like the Polish kid.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like, right? You don't know what to call it at that age, but you see it.
Yeah.
And then I remember, another experience I had was, Superman was like huge when I was growing up, the movies and all that. I remember being in the bathroom after gym class. This is like grade 1 or grade 2. And like, they have like the blow dryers to like dry your hands or whatever. So all the kids, all the white kids were like putting their hands up, or no, they're putting their heads underneath the blow dryer to like make the wind blow through their hair.
Right.
And they go like this to pretend they're a Superman.
Yeah.
And I realized I couldn't do that. And what did that say about, so they could be Superman,
but you couldn't.
But I can't. Right? When we talk about racism, it's so firmly built into how we build our societies that it's everywhere. But if you don't experience it, and you don't have any friends who are experiencing it, you're not going to see it.
Right.
If my experience is invisible to you, you're not going to see it. And, for me, it wasn't even like those kids did anything wrong.
No, exactly. Yeah.
It's that there wasn't a superhero that looked like me.
Right.
That I could pretend to be.
Yeah.
Every Halloween, I struggle to find a costume because, all of the, what we see as black men in the media are, rappers, thugs, and athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, in a lot of ways, it's like, I don't want to dress up as myself.
Yeah, no.
For Halloween, you know what I mean? Right?
Yeah.
Right? So, like, I want to be able to play in that fantasy, but there are just not enough stories that are widespread enough.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, I know the stories personally because, like, I indulge in those things. But if I go to a party, I don't want to have to explain my costume to everybody because they don't know anything about the black stories that I engage with.
Right.
You feel me?
Yeah.
So when we talk about systemic racism and we talk about inclusion, it really means everyone is involved. It doesn't mean everyone's going to be involved at the same time, because just different stories have different lenses, right? But if all the stories are one way and no other stories exist, then that's a problem.
Yeah.
Right? Or if those stories exist and you willfully do not engage with them, because there are plenty of black stories out there, or plenty of stories of a variety of other cultures, ethnicities, identities out there. They exist.
Yeah.
And they do come in the movie theaters, and they do come on TV, and the books are in the library. Not as many as there needs to be for all of those things, but they do exist. And if you willfully ignore those things, that's on you.
Yeah.
Then the person who owns the library or the movie theater, they stop putting them there because they don't make money.
Right. We have a lot of work to do, I'll tell you that for free.
That's it, man. We certainly do, but at least we're in a position where now we recognize that, and we're starting.
And man, everyone's got time to help. No one right now can be like, oh, I can't, sign a petition. I'm busy doing nothing at home. Like that. Everyone's got time to do something.
We all got time to do a little something.
Yeah, it's baby steps, man. Yeah.
Retweet something, repost something on Instagram. Because I don't actually like when people say that's not doing anything, because it may not be doing quote unquote enough.
Yeah.
But I've learned a lot of stuff on social media the last couple of weeks that I didn't know before because someone else posted it in their Instagram story or someone retweeted it.
Yep.
So what you're doing is you're amplifying and you're providing exposure when you do those things. So yeah, I think that stuff is important. Of course, you want to live out those actions in real life, but I will never criticize anybody where they do a lot of activism on social media, because behind every social media account, or most of them, if you want to believe in the Russian bot story, behind most social media accounts is a real person.
Yeah.
So you are actually reaching people.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Like I'm the same way. I learned so much stuff the last 2 weeks just because someone posted on your story. I'm like, oh, so that's actually all the questions I have about kind of mental health and what's going on right now. I have a couple final questions because originally, to kick off season 2, you're the first episode, by the way.
man. Thank you.
To kick off season 2, I kind of was gonna live stream on Instagram and like hit up everyone who was on season 1 and ask them some rapid fire fun questions. Never got to, so I'm just gonna hit you with them.
Cool.
If you're up for it, it's kind of to lighten up the mood.
Roll, baby. Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. So I read in your you have a blog on the internet. I read in the About Me on your blog that you have a super varying music playlist that kind of ranges from Daft Punk to Erykah Badu to Drake, stuff like that. So on that topic, what are your top 5 singers, rappers, or musicians, dead or alive, right now?
Sure. Right now,
yeah.
I gotta say, there's a rapper who I've been listening to a lot lately. I don't know how to pronounce the name, but J.I.D.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, he's dope, man. You can tell I don't really listen to as much music as I need to these days. I've been returning to a rapper named Joe Budden, who did this mixtape called Mood Music 2, which really helped me through my own experiences. Mm-hmm. It's all about his depression, and he's super honest in it. Dead or alive, man. I'm blanking out on you, man. This never happens. I'm choking in the clutch. Recently, I've been listening to like some Euro pop stuff recently, man. There is this duet called the Pirouettes. I think I don't know if they're French or from Belgium, but I know they sing in French. There's another group called Parcels that again, they're European. I'm not exactly sure, but sometimes Spotify recommends some stuff to you. And my boy Toby, he's from Toronto, Brampton actually. T-O-B, lowercase I. I've been into him a lot lately too, man. I actually know him personally. We're not super close, but I've been able to see his growth from opening for people to having a song on a big TV show on HBO. So so I think that's my top 5. That wasn't super rapid fire. I had to get there.
No, that's fine. That's a tough question. I don't even think I could do that right now, to be honest. So the next one is, so for me, my 2 comfort foods, without fail, are pizza and chicken wings, without fail. So for you, which one takes the crown, pizza or chicken wings? And then I have a follow-up for either one.
Oh, that's pizza all day, every
pizza?
Day.
So if pizza, what are your top 3 toppings first? Second, what is the best pizza joint in Toronto, in your opinion? And does pineapple belong on pizza?
Oh, boy. Yes, pineapple does belong on pizza.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Top pizza joint in Toronto. I would say Pizza YOLO. That's my top one. Top toppings. I'm a meat guy.
Nice.
So for me, it's all about that pepperoni, that ground beef. Let's throw some Italian sausage on that, baby. And go to town.
Ooh, that's a good sounding pizza, man. And you sprinkle the pineapple on top, just for an added touch. I put top 3, but if you don't have a top 3, just one. Shows or movies that are getting you through quarantine right now.
Oh man, probably the top one. Me and my wife have been doing a lot of Netflix lately. #BlackAF on Netflix. I think it's hilarious.
Oh yeah.
Actually, really deep in terms of explaining, a lot of different stories about blackness. Some people have criticisms, but anyway, it's a different thing. So #BlackAF. We watched something called Dead to Me, which I thought was dope.
Dead to Me is good. Yeah.
Right. And I'm gonna pick one that's personal for me. It's kind of dark, but I'm really into human psychology. It's like a documentary series. It's called I Am a Killer, and essentially what it's doing is interviewing people who are in jail for killing someone, and then also interviewing the prosecutors and whoever was involved in the case and hearing both sides. And it's really sometimes you're watching the killer's interview and you're like, damn, maybe they really didn't do it. And then you hear the evidence come out and you're like, whoa, this person's probably a sociopath. They were able to convince me so strongly that they didn't, but all evidence, real physical, not circumstantial, real evidence points to them. And I'm like, wow. So it's really I don't know. I like getting into human psychology, so.
Yeah.
I can't lie, too. I got into Tiger King, which I was reluctant to get into. But I was like, what is this? And then I got into it. For the same reasons. It's the human psychology behind everyone involved in the whole thing.
Those people are nuts.
Dude, like, interesting to say the least is what I'll say.
First thing you're going to do when quarantine gets lifted?
I'm going to have all my friends over.
Nice. Yep.
Pop some bottles, you know?
I love it. I will be doing the exact same thing. Hopefully it's soon. I mean, who knows? And then finally, if there's a viewer watching this who's kind of going through a situation that was similar to what you experienced, or just someone struggling with their own demons in general, what would you want them to hear?
I would say to that person that, you know, always try your best to keep hope. And even hope is a practice. You know, it's not necessarily going to land in your lap. You got to go out there looking for it. So try to find inspirational stories of real people, or sometimes even not real people, because even the things that are written about not real people came from a real person. Yep. So try to find inspirational stories and take the positive and the lessons out of those things, and to see that it is possible for someone to struggle mightily and still have a good outcome.
Words of wisdom from Asante himself. Once again, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, man. You know, I normally don't stay as long as we did here, but this was really good, so I appreciate it.
What I usually do with my guests now, because they've been on, I kind of give them like a 30-second shameless plug for anything that they've got going on in their life. And, you know, with all the interviews you've been doing, clearly you've got a lot going on. So if there's anything you want the viewers to know that you've got going on, now's your time.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing right now is I wrote this article called I Shouldn't Have to Say This. That's the title of the article. Throw that in Google with my name, Asante Haughton, and you're probably going to find it. Otherwise, you can go to kbiinspires.com, or is it .ca? It's one of them, and that's where the article is currently housed. I don't say this just to promote myself, but it appears that article appears to be having a huge impact on a lot of people. So go and check it out. You can hit me up on Twitter at ASANTE, or on Instagram at nerdy.black.guy, and you could essentially get to know me a little bit better.
Perfect. All right, and with that, we are done. So for all my viewers, I will see you guys next time. Thank you for watching another episode of the H Panel. I really appreciate you guys. For more episodes of the H Panel, click this button right here. And if you want to subscribe for more videos from myself, subscribe is right down below. Thanks, guys.